Welcome everyone to the Canadian Diabetes Association's Diabetes Awareness Month webinar series. My name is Farah Ismail and I'm a Program Manager for the CDA and I will be your host for today. We are delighted that you're able to join us for the webinar to learn about exercise tips that will help you and your diabetes. Now to start off, I'd like to draw your attention to the survey. It's located at the top right-hand section of your screen. In order to better serve your needs, we kindly ask that you provide us with your input by completing the short survey towards the end of the presentation, and we thank you in advance for your input. Now throughout the presentation, you will have the opportunity to type in a question and answer box, and that's located at the bottom right section of your screen. We ask that you use a box for any questions you have for the presenter, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. As well, we will be displaying a few polling questions throughout the presentation, and we'd love for your participation. It is important to note that the questions and responses will remain anonymous. Also note that you are able to customize your screens, so you can expand and collapse them as you see fit. So feel free to adjust them by dragging down the bottom right-hand corner of each of the webinar pods. Our presentation today will last about 45 minutes in length, and we'll have another 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the presentation for questions. It's important to note that our presentation today is recorded and will be available at a later date on our Canadian Diabetes Association's website. So now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Dr. Jonathon Fowles, and thank him for joining us today. But before turning it over, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Dr. Fowles is the Director of the Center of Lifestyle Studies at Acadia University, examining the effects of exercise in athletes, the elderly, and persons with chronic disease or disability. Dr. Fowles has done extensive work with many national organizations promoting physical activity and exercise, and is currently a faculty lecturer with Exercise is Medicine Canada, spearheading a national initiative to promote practical strategies for health professionals to implement exercise recommendations as a core component of primary health care. Now, for more information on Dr. Fowles, please read the speaker bio section, and that's located on the left-hand side of your screen. So, without further ado, I'd like to present to you Dr. Fowles.
Thank you very much, Farah. It's a pleasure to be here with you today, and I've done several in-person webinars across the country, and it's glad to be able to share this message with so many people across the country through the webinar format. I do acknowledge my disclosure here that I have received research and educational grants from TheraBand as well as Steps Count, and both of those companies also do support our physical activity and exercise in diabetes workshops that we do across the country and provide resistance band and pedometer products for those workshops. So before we get going, here's our first polling question, just to kind of give us a little bit of idea of who is attending the webinar and wanting to get information today. So if you take a few seconds right now to complete how you have been affected by diabetes, type 1, type 2, etc. Okay. And we'll just see each one of those. I'll give about 5 seconds or so to complete. So most of the participants on the call have type 2 diabetes or are at risk, and we have a number of families and friends, and of course a number of healthcare professionals on the call. Maybe some of you have seen me in workshops and are getting a little refresher of today's content, which is great. The next one, how long have you been affected by diabetes? A couple seconds there. And let's see the answer to that one. Most of you have had diabetes for a number of years, or the healthcare professionals on the line are helping people with diabetes. So that influences, physical activity and exercise choices and different things that we can talk about later on in the webinar. So as I begin here with the discussion about physical activity and exercise, it's important to kind of get an idea of the benefits and what investment, if you do make an investment in physical activity or exercise, what are some of the outcomes. And physical activity as a therapeutic agent has a number of kind of spin-off effects, not only towards managing diabetes, but reducing hypertension, cardiovascular disease, stroke, colon cancer, breast cancer, Alzheimer's disease, depression symptoms, and reducing the risk of premature death. It's actually been documented that physical activity and exercise contributes to 27, the reduced prevalence and management of 27 different chronic conditions. And that red number is the first one that if you actually get the physical activity guidelines of 150 minutes of moderate or greater physical activity per week, that you can realize that first number. And the second number is if you do more than that minimum of 150 or get an improvement in your fitness level, that is what some of the research is saying, that you can reduce risk or reduce prevalence of those different conditions. Now, in our society, compared to that guideline of 150 minutes, that if we ask Canadians if they are achieving that guideline, about half of Canadians will actually report that they are. Now, there's a little bit of a difference, though, when we actually measure this within individuals using something like an accelerometer or a pedometer that actually objectively measures physical activity levels. It's a little bit lower than that. About 15% to one-third of Canadians are actually meeting that target of getting above a moderate intensity for a sustained period of time where you can accumulate minutes of moderate to vigorous. And this is where many people believe that they're active, but really in today's society, being busy is something that we all are very aware of, but may not be as physically active in our busy lives as what we think, in that we're busy moving from one thing to another, but spending a lot of time, say, on escalators or in a car or something like that. So we're not moving maybe as much as we think we are. And the striking finding from this health measures survey that was done on over 5,500 Canadians showed that most of us are sedentary about 10 hours a day, which is about the exact opposite of how we used to be maybe 100, 200 years ago or more, where we were moderately to vigorously active 8 to 10 hours a day as stationary farmers, for example. So in the span of a few years, we've really changed our physiology and how we behave. And most of the evidence shows that in the past 50 years, since the 1960s, because of economies within the workplace and going from manufacturing and agricultural jobs to service jobs and working in front of computers and taking a car to work instead of walking or cycling, all those different areas, household energy expenditure as well as leisure time, that we've reduced our total physical activity expenditure by about anywhere between 300 and 500 calories per day on average over the last 50 years. And up to about the mid-'80s, dietary intake actually was falling in conjunction with this, because it's usually kind of regulated as humans. But in about the mid-'80s, that kind of leveled off, partly because as social beings, we eat 3 meals a day, and there's only so little food that we'll consume, but also because of the availability of food and processed food and fast food and all these other things. Just makes it easy for us to consume calories. And the problem is that since the 80s, our total physical activity levels have continued to plummet. And this difference is creating a weight gain in the population of, on average, 1 to 2 pounds per year every year, just to live in our society. And so that obesity epidemic is partly related to physical activity and eating. We know that there's genetic factors and things, but the problem is that our genetics have not changed in the last 30 years, whereas, for example, the incidence of type 2 and the crude prevalence rates of type 2 diabetes have doubled every decade for the last 30 years. So this is where I bring us to this quote, where the significant problems we face cannot be solved at the same level of thinking we were at when we created them. And that through the last 60 years, in the name of innovation and economy of movement to make our lives easier, we've actually have been engineering physical activity out of everything that we do, and we're paying for it now with our health. In that our physiology and we as humans are designed to move, we're designed to be physically active, and now that we aren't, dis-ease or imbalance in physiology is what is resulting. And this is what we believe is a major contributor to the explosion in diabetes rates. And so we have to think completely oppositely in this regard. And so for many of us, going out of our way to be physically active is actually an abnormal behavior relative to what's available in society. We have to consciously think to take the stairs and consciously think to not go through a drive-through and get up out of our car to go to Tim Hortons, for example. And that we have to consciously do those things. So we have to think very consciously about being physically active in this new thing called exercise, which is something in our society that we've needed to create and we need to embrace in order to be healthy, really, is to do this new thing called exercise. So the power of lifestyle, and particularly physical activity, for the prevention and management of diabetes is very strong. That it improves fitness and vigor, decreases insulin resistance, improves glucose control and blood pressure, and helps to maintain weight loss. And many of these outcomes are more effective than many oral medications. Now, some of you also may be thinking that the investment in physical activity doesn't pay any dividends until 2 months or 3 months down the road, and that's a big kind of investment to make. But we know through our research, and I'll show you this in a few slides, that physical activity and exercise can help you and your diabetes right now. Just by simply standing up out of your chair, you activate your muscles that helps to clear glucose out of your bloodstream and reduce your blood pressure. And if you went for a 30-minute walk, you could reduce your blood glucose by many millimolar. And that changes your mood. And all those things are immediate benefits for what you can get out of physical activity right now, today. Even while you're on this webinar, I'm actually giving this webinar at my standing desk because I know that by standing, I actually will have lower glucose, lower blood pressure throughout the day. So you on this call, I actually encourage all of you across the country to stand up maybe and listen to this webinar while we're doing it. So the recommendations for physical activity from the Canadian Diabetes Association are to get a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise each week. So moderate intensity is something where you're elevating your heart rate and your breathing rate a little bit, but not hard. You could still hold a conversation, and you're doing kind of large muscle group activities to get your body moving. 150 minutes seems like a lot to many people. That's 2.5 hours, yes. But 30 minutes a day relative to the 23.5 hours of the day that else is there is a small amount to help maintain our health. And fitness level is probably one of the best predictors of overall longevity as well as quality of life. And so it is a reasonable investment to make that as little as 30 minutes a day can have all those benefits. Now, within the guidelines, there's also the recommendation to do resistance exercise at least twice and preferably 3 times because it's been shown specifically in diabetes prevention and management that resistance exercise can have equal benefits to the aerobic exercise because we engage our muscles and 80 to 90% of blood glucose is actually used by muscle. So when we do resistance exercise, we can get that glucose clearance effect into the muscle because the muscles are contracting intensely and can use up that glucose, and that helps to maintain glycemic control. So just to kind of explain this in a little bit of a picture diagram here, there's actually 3 kind of domains of physical activity that we talk about. And one is non-sedentary behavior. There's a new research, that has just exploded in the last 10 years showing that just sedentary behavior alone has consequences to our health. And so therefore, by reducing that sedentary behavior, what I call non-sedentary behavior, so things like standing instead of sitting, getting up out of your chair, taking breaks at work, going for brief little walks, doing activities around the house, those kinds of things can actually contribute to your health in a significant way. Then, as we progress beyond that, light activities, to doing things that are more moderate intensity or more, that the more minutes that we accumulate doing those moderate to vigorous activities, the better. And that's where our guidelines are, is that at 150 minutes per week, there's actually about a 31% reduction in risk of premature death, in the sense that if you get 150 minutes per week, it actually extends your life by about 4 to 5 years. But the bigger difference is that it actually extends your years of independent living, because you improve your functional fitness, can extend it by 10 to 14 years. Now, having said that, the biggest improvement in somebody's health is actually going from not moving much to moving a little bit more. So that second dot there is actually 75 minutes a week, where this most significant improvement in health actually occurs. And so just doing as little as 10 to 15 minutes per day can actually reduce your risk of premature death by 15%, and can reduce prevalence of chronic disease and various other things. So doing a little bit is a good thing, and any minute is a good physical activity minute, according to the data. Now, the last area is the area of exercise. And when I say exercise, many people think, oh, I got to go to a gym, and I got to buy spandex, and I got to do all this stuff that I don't really want to do. But really, it is physical activity that is structured or planned or above a certain intensity, and that's maintained for a little bit. So, a brisk walk, if you did it for 30 minutes straight, is really exercise. Going for a swim, going for a bike ride, doing all those things where you're sustaining it for a certain period of time is also exercise. Now, the more we do in that regard, it further contributes to our health because it contributes to our fitness. And there's evidence that shows that if we do, vigorous intensity physical activity or exercise, that it further contributes to health benefits by 10 to 15% in that regard. So there is added benefit to doing that. And from somebody with a chronic disease who has type 2 diabetes or at risk, or that when we dose exercise in a certain way at a certain threshold, like is in the CDA guidelines for exercise, that you can improve your fitness level quite quickly and actually get quite an effect on outcomes, such as reducing A1C, etc. And those have been shown in a number of controlled studies where people do a structured exercise program for, say, 6 months. So why do physical activity or exercise? Because it does work. I mentioned that the harder your muscles contract, the more you get this kind of glucose transport to fuel the muscles for activity, and that has benefits to glycemic control. It actually reduces diabetes incidence. Some studies have shown that for people that just do the physical activity guidelines, anywhere between 45 and I've seen up to 75% reductions in prevalence of diabetes for those who meet the 150-minute guideline, for example. So there is quite a payoff if you do take the investment in physical activity or exercise. Here are some data that I've done right in our lab here at Acadia University, where we basically asked people to do the guidelines in one bout. And so people got on the treadmill and walked for 4 Mets, which is a brisk walk, just walking like you're maybe late for the bus, that in 30 minutes reduced blood glucose levels by 3.5 millimolar. We did some resistance bands, which we're going to talk about later in today's talk, for 30 minutes, and after about 30 minutes it was just about a 3 millimolar reduction, but because resistance training is more intense on the muscle, it actually further reduced blood glucose, that by 1 hour it was the exact same reduction as what you see with aerobic exercise. So for many of you out there, you might find that going for a brisk walk is actually very difficult, especially in the wintertime, and that's where we kind of position this webinar at the right time, because many people can get active in the summertime when it's nice outside, but then find challenges when they get to winter and the snow starts to fall. And so resistance band training is something that you can do in the comfort of your own home. in front of the news or in front of Sports Center or your favorite show and still get those glucose lowering benefits as you would for going for a brisk walk outside. Now, having said that, the Norwegians say there's no bad weather, just bad clothing, and so there's other things that we can talk about how to manage getting physically active in an aerobic way as well. But the resistance is something that many of us can do in the comfort of our own home. Now, optimally, the best strategy is actually to combine both aerobic and resistance. And this is a randomized controlled trial showing that if you do resistance exercise, you get some significant improvement in your A1C. If you do aerobic, you get a significant improvement. But if you do both, you get double the effect. And that's because aerobic and resistance exercise work in different ways on the body. So if you actually combine both, you get double the benefit. And that's why both of those recommendations are there in the CDA guidelines, because you can get that magnitude of effect when you do both of them. So combining aerobic and resistance is probably the best way to go. So some important questions now in this regard are you as active as you'd like to be? And would you like to be more active? And are you ready to change now? So if you're looking towards, this winter season and what can I do, how do I get there? Those are some questions to address that we hopefully will address in this webinar. So to start that conversation, first I'd like to ask the people on the call right now is, are you currently physically active? And how many minutes a week do you do on a regular basis? So the number of sessions that you do times the number of minutes per session to calculate what's your physical activity number for a week. Okay, so just another minute there or another second, and we'll see where we are at with regards to that one. Okay, so to kind of translate this information, this is what I would call a respective sample that many people, 23% are above 150 minutes at guidelines, which is relatively normal for this population, that there's 15% of you that are just below that threshold that might need just a little bit more help to get above there. 60 to 120 minutes is somewhat active, and that's where many people with chronic disease or with diabetes are sitting, is somewhat, doing a little bit but can do a little bit more, or might need a little bit of help to do a little bit more. And then some are in that 0 to 60 and in the not physically active part. And so what I will share with you now is just a little bit of pieces that hopefully will address each of those different areas of how you could get moving a little bit more. So if if you remember back to that first slide where I showed the kind of the dose response, is any minute of physical activity is better than the minute before. So if you're not active now, doing 10 minutes is better than none. If you are somewhat active and getting 50 minutes per week, well, that's better than nothing, but going up to 70 minutes per week is going to add your health benefits and so on. So hopefully I'll give you a little bit of information to address each one of those areas. Relating to that, of course, is what are some of the things that are keeping you from being active right now, or as active as you would like to be. It might be time, it might be inconvenience, enjoyment, fear of being injured, other things. And I know that there could be a whole host of things that you could put in the other there, but we'll stick to these ones, so just give you another couple seconds. And we'll look at the results of that. And the first one there, time. And that's pretty much every single workshop I've ever done, whether it's with healthcare providers or with patients. Time is always the one that comes up first. And it is true that we are a busy society and that we have, work and kids and all these various things. So how do we fit it in? And so the first thing that I'm going to say is that 5 minutes actually is showing in research now to contribute to health. And even if it's as little as breaking up your sedentary behavior for 5 minutes, that is actually showing to contribute to health benefits, and that if you can break up your time during the day, so it doesn't have to be 30 minutes all at once or more. It could be 5 or 10 minutes here and there that can help, and that kind of lends to that inconvenience. Some people think that I have to go to a gym or something like that, can sometimes be a challenge, and so inconvenience is an issue. I don't find exercise enjoyable, and that's one thing. Sometimes how you frame it is one thing. There's one study where they asked people to do a 30-minute walk, and they told half the group that it was physical activity and the other half of the group that it was exercise, and they rated it. They rated how they enjoyed it differently. If they called it physical activity, they thought it was more fun, whereas if they called it exercise, then people thought it was work. And so sometimes using the term exercise can also relate to things, and doing things socially can make it more enjoyable. The other very real one there, fear of being injured, I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, but that's a very real concern that many people with diabetes have. But I'll address it first now and then talk about it again later, that exercise is really, for most people, is safe, and there's very little risk of being injured or having a problem, and that if we start at the appropriate level. So I'll address that a little bit later as well. So thank you for that information. That really helps with the webinar. So one of the key things is, we have to outline what our strategies for success in this regard. We know that physical activity is a challenging behavior to fit into our busy lives, and there's some things that we can do to help along the way. One of the first things is to have a little bit of purpose behind why you want to be physically active. And that is all about making your health a priority. If we don't have our health, then a lot of the things in our life that we really enjoy can disappear. And so really taking this upon yourself, it's a gift you give yourself and all the people around you, whether your partner or your kids or your grandparents or whoever is important in your life. Being more physically active allows you to engage in your life at a different level because you're fit and you have vigor and all those things. So making your health a priority is something that is a gift that you can give yourself as well as others. Another key step has been identified is to set a goal. And it doesn't have to be a goal to run a marathon or something crazy like that. It can be something as simple as, I'm going to set a goal to do 3 15-minute walks this week, or to watch 1 hour less TV on Mondays. Whatever it might be, having an objective and writing it down is very empowering because it kind of directs your attention and focus, and it gives you something to work on. And that's really what setting a goal is about, because it leads to that next step, which is, a goal without a plan is really just hope, in that it's just kind of like the classic New Year's resolution, I'm going to get healthier, which doesn't really mean anything. It's about what am I going to do, when am I going to do it, for how long, at what intensity, and with who. And if you can answer those questions, then you're much more likely to actually adopt that physical activity. So if you have a goal of, say, 3 sessions a week of 15 minutes, so that's what you're going to do. That's, how long you're going to do it. But when are you going to do it? What time during the day? Schedule it into your day planner, or at lunch at work. And then with who? Who am I going to get to support me in this plan, such as a coworker or somebody else? And what am I going to do if that plan kind of goes awry? Which is, I was planning to walk outside, but I need to have a contingency plan that if it rains or it snows outside, what am I going to do then? Or if that person that comes into my office and says, oh, let's go for lunch instead of going for a walk, what am I going to do then? And you have to think through that stuff, because otherwise your plans can go astray. The next thing there is about getting into it, and that's motivation. And many people, usually after time, the next biggest barrier for many people is motivation. And this one may sound a little bit kind of stating the obvious in a certain respect, but a little bit problematic in another respect, that if you begin, motivation will follow. Because one of the things with physical activity is that the laws of inertia are at play, in the sense that a body at rest stays at rest and a body in motion stays in motion. And so if you can just take a step, it's more likely to lead to another step. And that's because we don't know how we're going to feel in 5 minutes once we get moving. And so when we're stationary, our psychology is telling us, oh, I don't really want to move. But once we get moving, then our physiology takes over and says, actually, this isn't so bad. And so we can get moving. And so sometimes beginning is what leads to motivation. And that's, it may seem, I'm trying to pick the right word for it, but, begin and motivation will follow. And that's where we do need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and I'll talk a little bit more about that one a little bit later, because exercise or physical activity may be a new thing for you. And so that's where we do have to kind of embrace a little bit of the unknown. And then at the end result, celebrate meeting goals, because it's important to achieve those goals that you set out and then to set new ones. So we'll walk through those a little bit more as we get into detail with the rest of the webinar. So the key thing there was about making the plan. And when it comes to kind of an individualized physical activity recommendation, it can go, we talk in the CDA with healthcare providers about these kind of 5 different levels. The first one could be as simple as increasing little physical activities in your day and reducing sedentary time. So for those of you who are inactive, just reducing sedentary time in your day can actually contribute to your mood, contribute to your health, contribute to your glycemic control, because just breaking up your sedentary time during the day can actually reduce your glucose levels by the end of the day by anywhere from 10 to 20% or more. And that if you stand in the afternoon, if you have a standing desk, there's studies that show it reduces glucose loads in the afternoon by 30 to 40%. So doing a little bit, it doesn't have to be going to a gym. So if you're not doing much right now and you have no regular physical activity, maybe watching an hour less of TV or moving more at work can be what your goal might be. For those of you who are moving a little bit, maybe a regular physical activity program can give you a little bit more structure and direction. And so that's where you might want to choose 3 to 4 days per week of 10 to 15 minutes to get some protected time, just like you would for a coffee break. You're giving yourself a physical activity break that's going to contribute to your mental health and your overall wellness. For some of you in that kind of somewhat active mode, maybe beginning a resistance activity might be something new that you can do. And if you can't get out for a walk, maybe doing some resistance activities is something that can complement your plan and actually have quite strong benefits to your glycemic control. So that might be an option for you. For those who are meeting that 150 minutes, the 23% of you that were doing that, maintaining that aerobic exercise with 30 minutes per session of a moderate intensity is something important. So maybe setting a new goal of maybe trying to do a 5K or getting involved in a fun run or trying a new activity. So maybe you're into hiking or walking right now, but maybe trying a new thing like swimming or cycling might be a new challenge to kind of keep you going. And as well, for those of you who are doing the 150 minutes, you may not be doing resistance exercise. So maybe trying to get into resistance exercise might be something that helps you to further manage your diabetes with physical activity and exercise. So there's something there for everybody, and it's about choosing the plan that's appropriate for you and where you want to go to the next step. It's not all about doing 2.5 hours of exercise per week. It's about choosing where you can go from where you are now to a little bit more. So here's some of that evidence now with regards to the sedentary behavior. Here's a slide basically showing that if you get less than 2 hours a day of recreational screen time, you can reduce your risk of cardiovascular disease by almost 100%. And so that's where that evidence comes from. Here's another note relative to that we watch 1 to 2 hours more TV and sleep 1 to 2 hours less than we did 40 years ago. So sometimes being tired is a byproduct of not getting enough sleep. So maybe if we set a goal to get more sleep, we might actually be able to be more physically active. And that by reducing our TV per day, that actually relates to reducing our risk of obesity and diabetes. There is evidence for that. here's a plan of a walking progression. So, most people start at the improvement stage there at week 5, which would be, 3 times per week of 15 minutes per time, and then you kind of progress over time. So each week try and add, 5 minutes or so. If you haven't been active before, maybe starting at week 1 and just having 2 times a week that you're going to do 10 minutes per time might be the way to start, and then add 5 minutes each week up to that. The goal is to get to the bottom there, which is 3 to 5 times a week of 30 minutes per time. There's other ways that you can do that. For example, many people with diabetes, they have sore knees, sore hips, these kinds of things. Using something as simple as walking poles. It reduces weight bearing on the lower limbs. It increases energy expenditure, or how many calories that you burn by engaging your upper body in the walking. It improves stability, which is important for many older individuals if they have a fear of falling. So that actually can help contribute to you being more active in that way. So that might be another option. When we're talking about gauging intensity, something in the fairly light to somewhat hard is really where we want to be, and that's what we call moderate intensity. This yellow zone, which is 40 to 60%, is what we call moderate intensity. That 60 to 80% is that somewhat hard to hard. That's our vigorous exercise zone, and that's where our heart rate's more elevated, we're sweating more, we're breathing very deeply, you can only hold a couple words at a time. And so if you're just starting out, it's better to start out in that yellow zone. If you have been active and you're getting 150 minutes, well, you get more bang for your buck if you work in that 60 to 80% zone, which is going to feel somewhat hard doing that aerobic exercise in that way. And if you did it on a 1 to 10 scale, it'd be 3 to 5 or so in that yellow zone, and 6 to 8 up in that green zone for the aerobic training. One other way to gauge your physical activity level and intensity is to use a pedometer or a physical activity monitoring device. And to know what moderate intensity is, it's about 100 steps per minute. So if you go for a 10-minute walk, you look at your monitoring device there, and you should get about 1,000 steps in a 10-minute walk in order to be at least moderate intensity. Many people aren't aware at how intense to move, and therefore those kinds of things help. If you wanted kind of what a tempo that would be, it'd be Staying Alive by the Bee Gees would be 100 steps per minute, and that would be a good way to monitor your physical activity. Now for the resistance side of things, the guidelines are there to do resistance activities with free weights or machines, or resistance bands are kind of a stepping stone to getting to those guidelines. And we, through the CDA, have disseminated lots of resources in this regard. So there's downloadable PDF sheets that describe how to do resistance exercise. There's also videos that are available through YouTube that if you type in Google diabetes resistance exercise, these videos will come up. And we're actually going to play a little bit of them for you in this webinar just to have you see what they are. So here it is right here. This is just a beginning introduction of this video.
Hello, my name is Jonathon Fowles, and I'm an exercise physiologist at Acadia University. Welcome to the Diabetes Physical Activity and Exercise Toolkit. Many of you already know the benefits of physical activity to helping manage your diabetes, but may have some questions about exercise. The Canadian Diabetes Association recommends you get at least 150 minutes of aerobic exercise every week to benefit your diabetes. This can be in the form of brisk walking, cycling, swimming, or other activities that you enjoy. The Canadian Diabetes Association also recommends resistance exercise 3 times a week to optimally benefit your diabetes. However, many of you may not know where to get started with this type of exercise. Resistance training is especially important for people with diabetes because active muscles help to improve blood glucose control. Resistance training works all the muscles of our body, especially the muscles that we don't use much in our daily activities, such as the muscles in our upper body. Resistance exercise also helps you to develop and maintain a healthy weight, improves your strength, increases your energy, and helps you to do
So there you go. There's some of the benefits. There's an introductory resistance video that kind of explains the benefits of resistance exercise and what things you need to begin. And then there's another video that actually goes through the actual exercises. So there's 12 exercises there. In each exercise, there's a description. You can get the PDF downline. There's a resource list at the bottom of the screen if you want to get one of these pamphlets. And it kind of walks you through that. And so there's some guidelines in those pamphlets about maintaining a stable and proper posture. You know, basically keeping your chest out and your shoulders back and relaxed. And these are kind of just some simple things about reducing the potential for any kind of injury or not. Although the risk of injury in resistance exercise is really very low. It's about 1 per several thousand hours of resistance training. So you'd need to do resistance exercise for several years to maybe have the potential to have one kind of resistance training injury. So for the most part, it's very safe. Keep movement slow and controlled. Remember not to hold your breath. You want to breathe as you're doing it. Keep to a comfortable range of motion, and then using an appropriate resistance. So there's 2 programs there. There's one that uses a resistance band, and then there's another one that uses a dumbbells. And so those are different ones that you can do. So here's an example of the very first exercise in those routines. So I'd like everybody on the webinar call to actually do this. So sit at the front edge of your chair if you're sitting. If you're standing, just kind of entertain us here by getting back in the chair. Sit with your chest up, your feet hip width apart. Slowly lift out of the chair with your arms, with your knees directly over your toes. Keep your back straight and your arms out. If you cross your arms, it's called a genie squat. If you have your arms straight, it's called a Frankenstein squat. You can pick which one you'd rather do. And then hold the top position with your knees slightly bent, and then slowly lower yourself down back to the chair, and don't drop down, and then just kind of pause and then come back up nice and slow. Doing them nice and slowly helps to control the movement and keep it nice and safe. And it actually works the muscles harder when you slow it down. So it actually improves your strength and functional independence when you do it nice and slowly like that. Here's the actual video that would go through and explain that. I'm just going to play the very first portion of it so that you know what is going on there.
Welcome to the resistance training portion of the Physical Activity and Exercise Toolkit. What we'll be doing now is showing you some basic resistance training techniques to get you started. We'll be showing you how to do a resistance training program that you can do in the comfort of your own home, either by yourself, with another person, or with the help of an exercise professional such as myself or another certified exercise physiologist, Shane. Shane will be showing you how to do 2 whole-body resistance training programs. The first program uses only a resistance band. This program is great to begin with because it is easy to do and uses very little equipment, just the band and a chair. You can adjust the intensity of your exercises by altering the length of the band. To make the exercise easier, grab a longer band. To make the exercise harder, grab a shorter band. The second program on this video uses similar but more challenging exercises and uses dumbbells. You can work your way up to this routine over time. It is important to do a short warm-up prior to beginning resistance exercise. A simple walk around the house or around the block can get your muscles ready to get going. You can do some simple stretches to limber up as well. Something for the upper body and something for the lower body can be enough to get you ready to do resistance exercise. Exercise number 1. Hips and thighs. Sit to stand from a chair. Start by sitting on the front of a chair with your chest up, feet about hip-width apart. Slowly lift out of the chair with your knees directly over your toes. Keep your back straight, your arms out, or you can have your arms and hands on your knees if you choose. Hold the top position with your knees slightly bent. Slowly bend your knees to lower yourself to the chair. Do not drop to the chair. It is important to breathe with each repetition. Keep your chest out and keep your back in a nice neutral position.
So there's an example of, that's the first exercise, and then those videos will basically walk you through and instruct you how to do all 12 exercises. And again, those are ones that if you get a resistance band, you can get it at your local pharmacy or your local Sport Check or anything like that. There's a couple different types of bands out there, whether it's TheraBand or Dynaband or whatever program you want. Those ones are accessible to do in the comfort of your own home. The other resistance workout there is the ones with dumbbells, so if you wanted to do that, again, that's something that you can do inside, indoors, in the comfort of your own home over the winter, that can help to maintain your fitness and improve your fitness and improve your strength and therefore reducing your risk of falling. Many of you said, risk of injury. Well, actually, the bigger risk of injury is actually, especially in the winter, is from falling, and one of the biggest predictors of falls risk is actually strength in the lower legs. So doing an exercise like that is actually something that can reduce your risk of becoming injured in other ways. So the key thing is progressing. Start easy. Don't do too much at the first time. Do one set of 8 to 10 reps, and then add a couple reps per workout until you get up to maybe one set of 20 repetitions with each of the exercises there. And then go up to 2 sets of 8 repetitions with a slightly harder resistance. And like is said in the videos there, you can shorten the bands to make it a little bit harder so that you feel a little bit more resistance with each repetition. That helps to build strength. So there's the other brochure that uses dumbbells. And again, there's a video that goes along with that. You can use that one. And if it is encouraged that if you get the help of an exercise professional, if you have access to that resource, then please do. But these online resources are a way to help you get going on your own. So now, having said that, I'm quoting myself here, the best exercise program in the world doesn't work if nobody does it. And that's where, I do recognize that there are barriers to getting moving, and maybe you don't quite have the confidence yet to take this on yourself. So maybe talk to your diabetes care provider, your diabetes educator. They might be able to help you set up a plan, or maybe make a referral to a program, or maybe through your diabetes center they have something that could help you to get going with a physical activity program. There's key things that can help tip the table in your favor, and those are things like reframing barriers. So things like time was a big one. Prioritizing your time. The average adult, watches 15 to 25 hours of screen time per week. So for 10% of that time we spend in front of a screen, you might be able to achieve the physical activity guidelines. Or even if all you did was stand up and walk around during commercials, you'd be 2/3 of the way to the physical activity guidelines if you just watched an hour a day of TV. Even, taking the stairs, choosing active options, or exercise in front of the TV if that's what you want to do. If you have something regular like the news that you want to watch, well, you can do those resistance exercises in front of the news, or you can do it with others. And that's where exercise can be social if you participate in a program in your community. Like I said before, the risks are real. Some of you said, I don't want to get injured. But for most people, beginning with low to moderate intensity physical activity or exercise is safe. If you have complex diabetes, where you have things like neuropathy or nephropathy, or you have real severe peripheral vascular disease or something like that, well, then you want to talk to your diabetes care provider to maybe get some more direction, or maybe some specific tips for you. But for most people that are stable, controlled with metformin or some other oral medications, or you don't have hyperglycemia or hyperglycemic episodes, you're okay to get moving. And you can start walking, and just be smart about it, and don't start too much too soon. start with, 2 to 3 days per week of 10 to 15 minutes and see how your body feels. You can always do a little bit more the next time if you feel good. I just caution people about trying to do, an hour the very first time you go out, because then you probably will feel sore, you won't enjoy it, and you might have some, disruptions with your glucose that you won't like. So take it in little steps and build it up from there. And that's where I come to the last kind of couple concluding things here about if you do get pain that is, sharp, localized, and stops activity, it's sudden pain, especially pain in your chest or anything like that, well, yes, those are warning signs. Pain in your knee or pain in your hip. Stop and get that sorted out, because you can't be active and you can't enjoy activity if you are in pain. But it's important to understand that for many of you who haven't been active before, discomfort and being a little uncomfortable is normal because this is a new activity for you. And your muscles will contract and it'll feel a little odd, but that's necessary to work through those gains in fitness because you're challenging your body in a new way. And for many of you, you have arthritis. That's a big comorbidity with diabetes. But we know that the biggest improvements of just about anything with regards to exercise for any chronic disease is actually in reducing symptoms of arthritis, because many people's joints don't work so well when they don't use them. And so therefore, low to moderate arthritis is significantly improved with physical activity and exercise. So seeing how you can get moving can definitely help. And that's where, if I ask everybody on the webinar, I have just a couple minutes here, just to cross your arms. Everybody will cross their arms a certain way. So now if I ask you to cross your arms the opposite way, with the other hand over top, that'll feel very uncomfortable. And that is really about beginning in something new. It's a new behavior and it feels funny. But if I asked you to cross your arms the opposite way 3 times a week for 15 minutes for 4 weeks straight, well, that would probably feel pretty comfortable for you after about a month. And that's really what I'm asking, is just for you to try something new, see how it feels, and see how you feel after a month. The one thing I don't want you to do is kind of set a big goal for big weight loss initially. Because the most common goal that people set with exercise is to lose weight, but it's important to set a behavioral goal first. Get yourself moving and allow yourself to be active, because you significantly contribute to your health, and there's benefits to your diabetes before you lose weight with physical activity. Once you get going and your fitness improves and you can do more in each exercise routine, well, then maybe you want to set a weight loss goal later on if that's important to you. But just moving contributes to your diabetes so much that you don't need to lose weight in order to get that benefit. So for many of you, people, you might think that success looks linear like this, but it really is kind of an up and down procedure, and that's where your diabetes care team is very important in supporting you in your physical activity objective. And there will be ups and downs. There will be times right now, right around the corner, the Christmas season, where you might not be as physically active as you'd like to be. But it's important to recognize that you can just kind of get moving the next day. And you can do a little bit right now. You can do a little bit, an hour from now or tomorrow. Any time you get moving is good movement. And so just do as much as you can when you can do it. And with that, I leave you with a journey of 1,000 miles begins with little steps. And sometimes just taking that first step is the important one, and the motivation and everything else will follow beyond that. So thank you very much for your attention. We have a couple minutes left for some questions here that I can answer over the webinar, and I appreciate your attention during the call.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Fowles. You've shared with us not only some important information on why we should exercise, but you've given us some really great practical tips as well as tools in that resource list for us to go about exercising on a regular basis. So we really definitely do appreciate that. We do have a few minutes for questions. There's quite a few questions we have, some really, really great questions, and so I just want to let everyone know and remind you that unfortunately if we do not get to your question today, we will still be happy to answer your questions. So kindly, if we don't get to them, please email us at webinars@diabetes.ca and we'll be sure to answer your questions. So for now, I'll start with our first participant. Our participant has asked, can you please define elevate your heart rate? What sort of guidance in this area do we give our patients?
Well, when we're talking about heart rate monitoring, the guidelines say 40 to 60% of max heart rate is kind of the moderate range, and 60 to 80% of heart rate is the more vigorous zone. But many people don't, unless they have a heart rate monitor or can take their own heart rate, know what those numbers are. So elevating heart rate above, a resting level, an average resting level of 70, but getting it up, around 100 or so is probably a good moderate level for many people. But the best way to do it is by calculating their heart rate range based on their resting heart rate and max heart rate. And so there is some information available called the Carvonen formula that is the most accurate way to determine somebody's heart rate range that's appropriate for them relative to their fitness level. So if you look that up, that's a way to do it. But slightly elevating it is basically, 20 beats above resting is probably a good starting point, and then see how you feel from there.
Great. Thank you so much for that response. I'll move on to our next question here. Our participant has asked, how many minutes a week should we do the resistance exercise training?
Well, the recommendation is actually 2 times per week, and that's because the total amount of time isn't as important as the number of times that you do it. So most people, a resistance session on average is 20 to 30 minutes. And so 2 times per week is anywhere between 40 minutes and an hour per week is what is recommended. And most of the literature shows that there's a dramatic improvement in musculoskeletal health and strength if you do more than 30 minutes a week of resistance exercise. So that could be 2 15-minute sessions or a little bit more than that, but that's kind of the guideline.
Great. Thank you so much for that clarification. Another question that's come from a few of our participants, they'd like to know, is yoga considered a resistance exercise?
Yes, I've done yoga, and there's various forms of yoga. That's the one thing, is that there's, numerous types, all the way from the more mild relaxation type yoga. It probably is just on the moderate, on the very, very light zone of resistance. But there's certain forms of yoga that actually are quite, strength-inducing and from a musculoskeletal health are actually very good. And those are more the power yoga type things. So there's a spectrum there. I would put on the spectrum all the way from very light up to moderate intensity with regards to the resistance activities. But if that is what somebody wants to participate in, they don't want to go to a gym and lift weights, I would definitely say that if yoga is the option, then that is a great choice to make, because if it's something that you're going to do, then that is the best option for you. And it does contribute to core strength and stability and musculoskeletal fitness, because you get range of motion and all those things. So definitely some yoga is better than no resistance exercise at all, for sure.
Great. Thank you for that. We'll just take another few questions here, folks, before we close off. Our next participant has asked, what is the best time of day to exercise? I wake up with a fasting blood sugar of 8 or 9, and without any breakfast, if I go for a walk for half an hour, my blood sugar is even higher, which is up to 10. Why is that? Okay.
Well, my first answer to that question is usually the time of day that you will do the exercise is usually the best time of day to exercise. When you can do it is the best time, because some physical activity is better than none. Now, having said that, to answer your nuanced question there is the dawn effect, which is kind of a stress response that your body does in order to wake itself up. And it activates, certain hormones, release glucose from your liver in order to prepare you for the day, and that usually happens first thing at about 4 or 5 in the morning. So that's part of the reason why you can have elevated blood glucose first thing in the morning, and that even if you don't eat, your body is in that little bit of stress state that if you go for a vigorous walk, can further potentiate the stress response that can further elevate blood glucose. So if you are in that boat, and if your body is particularly a little bit stressed in the morning, maybe finding another time during the day may be a better option for you. If you are finding that you're going for a walk and your blood glucose is going even higher, that might mean that you're going a little bit too hard relative to what your body needs at the time. Because if you go for a 30-minute walk, your blood glucose, of moderate intensity, your blood glucose should be being used up there. And if it's vigorous, then you get this kind of stress response. So maybe back off on the intensity for a little while until you get it kind of brought under control, or picking a different time during the day where your body's a little bit more stable, let's say. But for some people, getting up and going for a walk in the morning is something that, A, they fit into their schedule, B, makes them feel better throughout the day, and C, actually lowers their glucose response during the day. So there is a little bit of individual consideration there, and so you do have to find what is the best pattern for you, and do that in communication with your diabetes care team, and having that conversation about blood glucose levels, etc.
Great. Thank you so much for that response, Dr. Fowles. We'll just take one last question here over the webinar. And again, just a reminder to participants, we'll be happy to answer your questions. If you send us a quick email at webinars@diabetes.ca, we'll be happy to respond. So our last question here is, for type 1 diabetes, is it better to do resistance exercise before cardio?
Actually, the newer evidence that I've seen on this actually has supported that, because of the decline in blood glucose with type 1s, because you have a lot of insulin sensitivity, that you can get hypoglycemia if you do aerobic exercise. But the resistance exercise, for that explanation I just gave, is kind of stressful to the body a little bit, so it can actually raise blood glucose, and then you use it in the aerobic exercise after, so that you won't go as low. And what is actually being shown is kind of a combination of the two, is actually alternating back and forth is actually probably a way to do it. So instead of going 30 or 40 minutes of aerobic all at once, is maybe doing a little bit of resistance exercise, then 20 minutes of aerobic, and then another 15 minutes of resistance, and then another 20 minutes of aerobic. If you were going to do both of them in one session, that would probably be the best way to do it, because then you get a little bit of kick up with the glucose with the resistance exercise, and then the aerobic exercise brings it down, and then you get a little bit of a lift again with the resistance exercise. So that's probably the better way to do it. Again, individual kind of patterning. You probably want to take your blood glucose a couple times to see how your body's reacting to that pattern, and just to make sure it's in a good range for you.
Great. Thank you so much for those very in-depth responses. Folks, that does conclude our webinar for today. I'd sincerely like to thank Dr. Fowles for coming here and delivering such an amazing presentation and speaking on behalf of the Canadian Diabetes Association. It's been a really great learning experience, so we definitely appreciate that. Just want to remind everyone that our webinars will be available online to everyone in the coming weeks, so please check us out on our diabetes.ca website under the past webinars section. We do want to send out a quick thank you to our generous sponsor, Lilly, for helping make this webinar possible. And this is the last webinar actually for the series and for the year. So we do hope that you'll join us again for our next series. It'll be beginning in February of 2016. So we do hope that you'll participate and join us for that. We hope that you've enjoyed the webinars and learning with the CDA this year, and we look forward to your participation next year. For any other questions, ideas, thoughts, opinions, anything else that you need in terms of the programs and services that we offer here at CDA, please feel free to give us a call anytime. We're available at 1-800-BANTING, so that's 1-800-226-8464. We look forward, again, as I said, to your participation next year. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.